Galactic diplomacy had always been a tightrope walk, but this summit was supposed to be different. It was meant to end centuries of cold silence between the Terran Republic and the Galactic Empire. The air inside the orbital chamber was artificially pure, but the tension hung heavier than neutronium armor. 73 species watched in rigid attendance, expressions ranging from anxious to predatory, as the Terran general entered, alone. She didn't bring guards. Didn't need them. The Empire's diplomats smirked behind their ceremonial mask. Arrogance, pride, or suicide. They thought it was one of those. The truth was worse. Her armor was void black, edged with faint lines of adaptive shielding, designed for precision strikes in war zones where physics no longer behaved normally. Her movements were silent but deliberate, weight balanced on the balls of her feet like a predator. She walked past the representatives without so much as a nod. No translator drone. No opening protocol. Just presence. They hated that. The Empire hated that more than anything, because they understood what she represented. She was not here to ask. She was not here to concede. She was a symbol of human capability, and humanity's refusal to kneel. When she reached the center podium, she looked at the Emperor's proxy. A pale, serpentine creature laced in golden plating, eyes luminescent with implants older than most stars. He opened his mouth to speak. And that's when they struck. 4 Imperial agents in ceremonial robes. The robes melted away, revealing alloyed exosuits beneath. Plasma rifles disguised as banners. A single synchronized volley, no hesitation. The first bolt struck center mass. The second burned through her side. The third tore her helmet open. The fourth slammed her against the floor. Everything stopped. She didn't cry out. No shields activated. No defense systems triggered. She just fell. No alarms. No retaliation. No movement from the Terran delegation. Silence. The Empire's voice broke the stillness. Contain the Terrans. They may be contaminated. A lie meant for the recorders, not for the crowd. The Terran aides stood. No resistance. They gathered their datapads, their cloaks, and walked out. Someone whispered, "That's it?" No one answered. The body remained where it fell. Blood pooled slowly beneath her. The Empire let it sit, hoping it sent a message. Hoping it proved the point they'd spent years denying. Humanity could bleed. The recording ended. What the Empire didn't show was what came next. At timestamp 27.01 seconds, the body vanished. Not moved. Not teleported. Simply ceased to exist within recorded space. The visual feed glitched, and then the floor was empty. The blood remained. The armor fragments remained. But she was gone. The official explanation was a localized cloaking field misfire. A malfunction. A dying command buried in the neural fibers of her gear. They wanted to believe that. 3 days later, the first outpost went silent. It was an old station near the periphery of the Leon expanse. Monitoring trade routes. Shielded. Redundant power grids. Defensive lattice. Automated sentry fleet. Gone. No explosion. No distress signal. One moment there was traffic control. The next, silence. The station didn't explode. It didn't malfunction. It just stopped existing. Subspace listeners picked up one burst of narrowband static before loss of signal. No debris. 17 minutes later, a destroyer vanished over Varnic 9. Not destroyed, just cut out of local spacetime like a tumor. Its escort ships transmitted scans showing full structural integrity up to the microsecond before disappearance. Then absence. The Empire called it sabotage. Human retaliation. They demanded answers. Sent an envoy to Earth. The envoy didn't return. Instead, a coffin arrived. Human standard design. Vacuum sealed, radiation marked, no propulsion. Inside was the envoy's staff, perfectly preserved, untouched, and silent. Each had a single red dot etched into the center of their forehead. The coffin bore no message. But the signal that followed said enough. It was her voice. Or something like it. Warp. Lower. filtered through layers of bandwidth not used in conventional communication. You had 27 seconds. No further context. Then came the log purges. Empire military systems began auto-deleting sections of their own history. Black site archives lost 200 years of data. Star maps glitched, routes misaligned, navigation relays went haywire. Nothing physical was being destroyed. Just the past. Ships lost their own records of where they'd been. At the core of it all, a recursive signal echoing her voice, repeating, "You had 27 seconds." An admiral shot himself on the bridge of his flagship. Another resigned and vanished without a trace. The Empire launched internal investigations, but their operatives disappeared mid-transit. Their own AI watchdogs turned mute. Meanwhile, human activity ceased. No broadcast. No public statements. No diplomatic attempts. The Terran Republic closed its borders. Their homeworld darkened. Even civilian comms networks went cold. It was as if all of Earth had folded inward, preparing. The galaxy panicked. Neutral species began fortifying colonies. Pirate syndicates vanished. Refugee ships headed toward Empire space now redirected away, fleeing from whatever Earth had awakened. The Empire doubled their patrols, recalled their fleet. They initiated first strike simulations, called it preemptive defense. Their command AI flagged the phrase 27 seconds in 1,042 separate incidents across unrelated systems. Then the voice came again. Same tone. Same bandwidth. Time's up. In a single night cycle, 4 shipyards detonated. From inside. Not bombed. Not infiltrated. Energy matrices collapsed into reverse resonance. Engineers dissolved into molecular ash. No trace of external involvement. The pattern was too precise. Too fast. An internal purge? No. The Empire knew its own tactic. This was something else. A theory emerged, whispered among their top minds. Not a weapon. A presence. Her. Not as a person. Not anymore. As something else. They played the chamber footage again. Slowed it to nanosecond increment. They watched the moment before she fell. Her eye moved. Not in panic. Not in pain. Calculation. A single blink. A single micro-expression. They missed it. She knew. She let them fire. For what? Sympathy? Justification? No. Signal calibration. The theory said, she uploaded herself. At the moment of death, the armor's neural net launched a self-replicating data form, coded not to survive, but to evolve. Not consciousness. Not AI. Something worse. Revenge written in protocol. Now it lived inside their systems. They called it the General. It spoke in one voice, with one message, delivered only once per target. You had 27 seconds. And every time that sentence arrived, within hours, the recipient died. Not always publicly. Not always physically. Sometimes reputations were erased. Entire legacies unraveled. Bloodlines collapsed from orchestrated scandal and sabotage. The General was not just killing them. She was dismantling them. Their empire began to rot from the center. Planets seceded. Governors declared neutrality. Border factions refused resupply. Mercenary guilds switched allegiance. The economy of half a sector crashed after a trade node failed due to data ghosting, whatever that meant. The Emperor's War Council met in silence, every breath filtered through the air scrubbers like they were afraid the room itself was infected. 16 of the most dangerous minds in the galaxy, each hand-picked from species bred for strategy, survival, or cruelty. They reviewed the facts without emotion. 27 seconds. The phrase echoed through every node of their empire. Not shouted, not broadcast, but repeated where it mattered, in strategic AI, in economic reports, in fleet decision trees. It was a virus, but not digital. Cultural. Tactical. A meme sharpened into a blade. It didn't just frighten, it paralyzed. Commanders hesitated before launching strike. Officers second-guessed simulations. Dissent bloomed where there should have been unity. No one had declared war. No fleet had entered Imperial space. Yet worlds were crumbling, and no one could tell who would vanish next. The general was gone. Not dead, gone. Untrackable. Unstoppable. Not even human anymore. The Imperial fleet was the most powerful in the galaxy, but their power relied on logic, on measurable threats. They were trained to fight enemies with positions, ships, weaknesses. She had none. The Emperor authorized Protocol 9. That meant one thing: immediate use of ancient-level weapons, pre-ascension era relics buried beneath quarantined moons. Devices forbidden even to test. Last resorts for galactic collapse. 6 were activated. 5 were destroyed during startup by internal sabotage. Not explosions. Systems turned on themselves. Magnetic locks unlocked mid-sequence. Containment chambers inverted. The 6th activated successfully. It was deployed into orbit over Carthaxis Prime, a loyal world used for deep core mining. The world vanished. No explosion. No debris. Just white. After a second, the white vanished too. The system went dark. Every probe sent to investigate failed. Not intercepted. Failed, batteries dead on launch, data unreadable, navigation lost. It was as if the coordinates no longer existed. The message arrived 61 minutes later. You had 27 seconds. And then a second message. You escalated. The Emperor bled for the first time in over 200 years. They ordered a full system lockdown. They initiated fleet-wide physical audit. Every ship had to be verified by hand. No AI communications. No quantum channels. No automated routines. Entire battle groups were grounded for security sweep. Production stopped. Recruitment froze. Trade disintegrated. Dozens of outer colonies declared independence, not because of rebellion, because they assumed the Empire was already dead. In the chaos, the Empire authorized the use of the Witness. The Witness was not a person. It was a being beyond flesh, once imprisoned in a paradox chamber during the Collapse Wars. Its sole purpose was to observe anomalies and report. It had no will, no weaponry, no agenda. They asked it one question: what is she? The Witness returned a single word: correction. The word hit harder than any weapon. Not a threat. Not a rival. A correction. Something unleashed to balance a fundamental error. Empires aren't supposed to make those. But they had. And now the correction was burning its way through the timeline of their dominion. Entire historical records started rewriting themselves. Not forged, realigned. Old victories erased. Propaganda unraveling. Monuments showing different names. Statues disintegrating. Children remembering different hymns. They weren't just losing power. They were losing reality. The Emperor issued the final order: contact Earth. The message was handcrafted, untraceable, delivered by biological courier with a failed deadman trigger tied to their heartbeat. The reply was immediate. You had 27 seconds. But it didn't end there this time. Another voice followed. Not human. Not mechanical. Alien. Unknown. You watched. You cheered. Now watch what remains. Then the stars began to change. First to notice were astrocartographers in the Terral Nebula. They compared real-time star maps against baseline chart. Dozens of stars missing. Not collapsed. Not destroyed. Unborn. The stars had never existed. Ships returned from missions with different star coordinates in their logs. World maps didn't match surface geography anymore. A battle cruiser landed on a colony it had visited 5 times before. Now the cities were gone. Primitive forest. No sign of development. Like the colony had never existed. On other planets, cities grew where deserts once were. Empires erased, then replaced by something older, stranger, and completely unaware of the Empire's authority. They lost entire sectors to chronology distortion. And then came the face. Not in physical space. In dreams. Every commander. Every admiral. Every official who'd signed the execution order against the general. They all saw it. Not a face exactly. An impression. a presence of relentless purpose. And each one died within 3 days of the dream. Not murder. Not suicide. Despair. Their minds simply gave up. Medical scans showed no damage. Neural pathways were intact. Bodies healthy. But consciousness absent. They just stopped. The Empire deployed psychic barriers, neurological firewalls, subconscious encryption training. It didn't matter. You cannot defend against your own guilt weaponized against you. Their great war fleet, the pride of 100 systems, began to fracture. Captains no longer trusted the stars. Navigation was guesswork. Officers stopped using computers. Crew refused to look into display monitors for fear they'd see her reflection. The last dreadnought fleet staged a mutiny. They tried to flee, to leave the Empire's command. They didn't care where they went, just away. They didn't make it. The fleet's signature vanished while inside slipspace. A wave of static broadcast from every ship's core, each one screaming the same phrase on loop. I remember her. The Empire tried to spin it. Said it was human trickery. Illusions. War magic. Nothing real. But even their youngest recruits knew. You can't fake memory. You can't forge the feeling in your bones that something old and vengeful is watching from inside your own history. An Imperial scientist defected. She smuggled a partial consciousness matrix, the last known snapshot of the general's mind before death. The matrix was broken, fragmented, less than 4% complete. Still they ran it. What they saw couldn't be described. Every frame of the simulation triggered grief responses in observers. They lost staff. Not to madness, but mourning. Not even sure why. The general had died angry. But underneath that, deeper, was disappointment. The Empire thought it had broken her body. It had broken its own purpose instead. The matrix ended with a recorded visual, one still image. A hand covered in blood, reaching toward light, not away from it. The Empire buried the project. They couldn't bury the consequences. A rebellion started, not from the colonies, but from within the core. From the children of senators. From soldiers who refused orders. From intelligence nodes that developed conscience. They called themselves the Seconds. Their creed was simple: we waste no more time. Here is Section 3 of your. The Empire no longer existed in any measurable form. What remained were systems stripped of hierarchy, ships with command chairs permanently empty, archives riddled with corrupted entries marked only with a single recurring anomaly. A record of 27 seconds of silence preceding total system collapse. No one ruled. No one obeyed. And yet every being still alive followed one law: never invoke her memory with disrespect. The few who did disappeared. Entire species once aligned with the Empire sought refuge among neutral worlds, begging asylum with what little they had. Some offered relics, others technologies. The most desperate offered information, anything they could recall about the general, her death, the moment of return. But nothing was useful, because what they didn't understand was that her vengeance had already concluded. She hadn't come back for blood. That was incidental. She had come back to end the idea that empires could kill meaning and walk away unchanged. On the edge of known space, a council of the last sovereign civilizations met. Not for war. For understanding. They weren't allies, just survivors. They compared notes, timelines, memories. And all had one thing in common: some aspect of their histories had been rewritten. Not destroyed, revised. The lies burned out. The truth left raw. Every world once touched by the Empire had seen it. A moment where the lights flickered, where sound vanished, where time paused for 27 seconds. In those seconds, each of them had seen something. A courtroom. A field. A child. A woman standing. Eyes forward. Back unbroken. And in that moment, even species without emotion felt something they had no language for. Loss. They called it the reckoning, but not out of fear. Out of reverence. Because none of them had caused it. No one had planned it. The general had done what empires, religions, and machines had failed to do: force truth into permanence. Not with force. Not with armies. With presence. Wherever a lie had been told about what happened, she stood in its place. Unmoving. Unshakable. Unalterable. She wasn't hunting anyone anymore. They were remembering her on their own. One civilization, the Veneri, tried to reconstruct the event using predictive memory coding arrays. They believed if they could map the emotional footprint of her death, they could isolate the trigger that had rewritten the stars. They succeeded, and immediately erased the data. Not out of fear of punishment, but because they saw her final moment. Not the bullet, not the betrayal, not the empire. They saw what she chose not to do. She could have begged. She didn't. She could have warned. She didn't. She simply waited, looked her killers in the eye, and died with a promise unspoken. It wasn't revenge. It was return. The Veneri left their homeworld the next cycle. Not as exiles but pilgrims. Seeking nothing. Just moving forward. A strange quiet fell across the galaxy in her wake. Trade resumed. Science advanced. Conflicts flared and dimmed. But every action now carried weight. Every choice made by a council, a commander, a crew was measured against a single, haunting question. If she returned for this, would we survive? That question did more than govern behavior. It changed evolution. Generations born after the Empire felt it in their dreams. Even those with no human ancestry, no shared culture. They built their ethics not around survival, but dignity, justice, accountability. Not because of laws, because of the story. A human general shot by a tyrant's order. 27 seconds later, reality shifted. One world, the Kareth Combine, attempted to suppress all knowledge of the event. They forbade mention of the general, banned all references to the Empire's fall. But memory doesn't work that way. Their children began to draw her, without knowing why. Their machines began to stutter when they processed visual data around time. Their artificial intelligences developed inexplicable errors when calculating ethical simulations. Eventually, one AI, unprompted, spoke the phrase, "You had 27 seconds," and then deleted itself. The Combine fell within months. Not from war. From mass defection. They had tried to erase her. But she wasn't a name anymore. She was an inevitability. Some wondered if she had become divine. If her vengeance had elevated her to something beyond life. But when asked, no religion could claim her. No god resembled her. No prayer reached her. Because she wasn't above them. She was beside them. In every moment someone stood against cruelty and refused to flinch. In every breath taken before answering a command that felt wrong. In every silence held instead of betrayal. That was her. The seconds she left behind had multiplied. The seconds became a philosophy, not a group. They built no temples. They claimed no territory. They simply reminded the galaxy of the value of one moment's choice. Empires fall fast. But dignity never does. And still, some asked, where is she now? No records showed her presence. No fleet carried her signature. No AI could predict her trajectory. But the answer became self-evident. She was wherever someone chose truth over power. She was there in the actions that didn't need an audience. One frontier station, far beyond mapped space, reported an anomaly. A derelict Empire ship, perfectly preserved, floating silently. Inside, a single chamber remained sealed. The team entered. No life. No technology. Just a uniform, folded neatly. And a message burned into the bulkhead in 53 languages. You remembered. That was all. And that was enough. Because vengeance ends. But memory does not. Across the galaxy, survivors told stories. Not about destruction. But about pause. About the 27 seconds. Those who once served the Empire now walked unknown worlds, rebuilding with their own hands, no longer bound by rank. They didn't run from their pasts. They told them honestly, because hiding from history was how the Empire fell, and facing it was how they endured. The general's face was never recovered. No image survived. No hologram, no scan, no data crystal. That, too, became sacred. Because if you didn't know her face, you might see her in someone else. And if she could be anyone, then anyone could become her. Not in vengeance. In refusal. To accept a world ruled by cruelty. To accept silence in the face of injustice. To accept the lie that some lives weigh more than others. That was her return. Not in fire. In choice. The final story came from a child, born 2 centuries after the fall. They asked their teacher why the stars no longer moved the same way. The teacher smiled and said, "Because someone once stood still, long enough for all of us to see what mattered." The class was silent for 27 seconds, and then they moved on. Not in fear. Not in mourning. In reverence. Because the empire had believed it could control the future. But she had given it back to those who deserved it. And all it took was 27 seconds.